Hi everyone, this is Attorney Lilian with Lily Legal, and today on this immigration chat, we'll be talking about VAWA. So this is the Violence Against Women's Act that allows someone that was or is married to a U.S. citizen or permanent resident to be able to apply for status in the U.S. and even get a green card if they were abused during their marriage by their U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse. So if you are interested in this topic, or if you have any other immigration-related questions, please feel free to put them in the comments so that we can chat about them, okay? So, like I said, I'm Attorney Lilian. I'm an immigration lawyer based in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I have the great privilege of representing my clients and helping immigrants get status, not just for themselves, but for their families right here in the US using US immigration laws. So if you have any questions or would like to schedule a consultation with me, you can do that by calling my office, going to my website, or you can even, all of my information will be in the description box as well, okay? So we are going to jump right in because I know people have questions and there is a lot to cover with this. What type of abuse counts, all of that. We are going to cover all of those questions today, okay? So the first thing we're going to cover is what is VAWA? Who can apply for it? How do you even go about applying for it? Okay, so that is everything we will cover today. And again, if you have questions about this or any other immigration matter, please feel free to ask. I am here for you. I am here to answer your questions. So we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that VAWA was created specifically for people that are married to US citizens and permanent residents. So if you fit into that category, then you have to also have been abused during that marriage. And the abuse has to take place in the US. So your marriage doesn't have to take place in the US, but the abuse itself by the permanent resident or the US citizen has to take place in the US. So this is one of the requirements. And again, today I will be only talking about spouses of US citizens and permanent residents. Just know that parents of US citizens and permanent residents and children of US citizens and permanent residents can also apply for this act. But today I'm specifically going to be talking about spouses of US citizens, how you qualify for it, and what documentations you will need if you fit into this. Okay, so if you qualify, if you were married to a US citizen or a permanent resident and you were abused during the marriage. So this is so when we talk a bit about abuse in this context, there is a lot that goes into it. It is not just so I've seen people say it's regular marital issues, but it goes further than that. It's not just you and your spouse had one argument, but again, that one argument could have led to physical abuse that led to you going to the hospital, right? It could be one incident, but if it was just an argument over something small and it ended there was nothing beyond that, and everything has been great since that incident, you might not qualify. But again, the most important thing you need to know about this is that you are now qualified to determine what is abuse. Okay? That's the most important thing I want you to get out of this chat, is that you are not qualified to say whether something is abuse or not. That is something we can talk about. That is something a psychologist will be able to do. That is something USCIS will be able to say, but you as an individual, you might think that something doesn't rise to the level of abuse, but until you actually meet with a psychologist, or we go through the abuse charts and wheels and see if there's more to it than what you think. Sometimes as an individual, you have been desensitized. If you've been in the marriage or the relationship for a long time and some things have been going on, you might not, you might just think that's the way relationships are. Without talking to someone, you might not be able to get all the information and be able to really, really determine if you are in an abusive relationship, and if the abuse rises to the level that you would be able to get immigration benefits. Okay, so hi Kevin, welcome to the live. If you have any questions, please put it in the comments and I will be able to respond to it. Again, your questions can be about VAWA, and it can be about any other immigration topics. We're here to chat, so feel free to do that. So, like I said, the first step is basically determining if there has been abuse in the relationship. So, as you all know, in this chat, I talk to you about how I handle this for myself, for my clients. I'm not talking about how other lawyers might handle it or how some other individual might handle it. I'm talking about how I deal with this with my clients. So typically with a VAWA case, because, like I said, you as an individual might not be qualified to determine if the actions by your spouse rises to the level of abuse for VAWA purposes, I always recommend my clients speaking with a psychologist, because this is an independent person that their job is basically to talk to people, analyze their situations, come up with plans for them, treatment plans. I've had, in some situations, there are treatment plans after you speak with the psychologist, because trauma is real. And when you're going through VAWA, it is not a light thing, right? It's not something to just jump into and think, oh yeah, this is the thing that's going to get me papers. Because you have to actually have been abused. You have to actually be able to discuss the abuse. I've had people that are not yet able to even talk about what they have been through, right? And before I can even start the process, I always start with support for the person, because there's so much to it that it can be emotionally draining. So I make sure that my clients are supported and they have resources that can support them as they're going through this process, because it's going to be going through every single instance of abuse, right? Basically reliving all that trauma. So this is not something I lightly recommend to people. This is something that takes a lot of personal work. So that's the first step, seeing a psychologist, making sure you are mentally supported, socially supported as you're going through this process, because it is going to be draining on the individual that qualifies for this, okay? And so basically, that's the first step I do with my clients. Once we get that done, we start getting the application together, filing the application. So when your spouse is a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, and your priority date is current. So for a U.S. citizen, you are an immediate relative. So there's always going to be a visa available. But for permanent residents, if there's no visa available, you can only file the VAWA application. You have to wait till there's a visa available to file the green card application. So for my U.S. citizen, for spouses of U.S. citizens, I always applications together just so you'll be able to get work authorization, get a social security number, all those things, right? So those are the steps. So we start with the application, go through that, the work authorization gets approved, and then your green card. You might have an interview for the green card. Sometimes they might approve it without an interview. It all depends on your documentation and the facts of your case. So now, what type of documents do you need to actually prove that you qualify? The first thing is you need to have your identity documents. So birth certificates, visa, showing how you came into the US. Even if you didn't come into the US with authorization, you may still qualify. So don't disqualify yourself, okay? So that's the first step. The next set of documents you'll need is you would need to prove your spouse's current status. So if you're saying that you're married to a U.S. citizen, we would want to have some sort of documentation showing that your spouse is a U.S. citizen, or if they're permanent resident, some sort of documentation showing that they're a permanent resident. If you are not able to provide this, it's not the end of the world. You want to know why? Because we have a way of asking USCIS to basically check in their records, because if the person is a U.S. citizen or if the person is a permanent resident, most likely they applied through, especially if the person is an immigrant as well, they would have applied through USCIS. USCIS has access to the Social Security Administration. They can get that information. So if you are not able to safely, and that's the key word. So all the documents that has to do with your relationship with your spouse, if you are not able to safely get that document, that's something we would need to discuss. I would never want you to go and try to get proof of US citizenship or proof of permanent residency if it is not safe for you to do that, okay? Because there might be alternatives that we can do. There might be other ways to get those information. So before you put yourself in harm's way, it's best to have that conversation with me, and we will figure out what the alternatives would be. So now you have your documents, your spouse's proof of their status. Now the next step is proving your relationship, okay? You have to prove that you and your spouse were in a bona fide marital relationship. That means you entered into the marriage for love, not for immigration purposes. If at any point USCIS finds that you entered into the marriage for only immigration purposes, you would not be approved for this, for VAWA, okay? So you have to be able to show that you and your spouse lived together, right? So if you had joint bills, leased together, any of those things that I list on my videos about documents for marriage-based cases. So any of those documents will come into play here. So you have to prove that you are in a bona fide marital relationship. And then you have to the next step is proving the abuse. And this is where things usually get sticky for my clients, because it takes so much mental energy. It takes so much emotional energy to go through the process of basically writing down every single instance of abuse that you have been through in your relationship, talking to a psychologist and all those things, basically reliving this over and over just to get this application done. So, which is why I said in the beginning, I usually recommend that my clients have some sort of emotional support, a therapist that they're going to, or a support group, because this is something that really, really is taxing on the person emotionally and physically. So it's really important that when it comes to the section where we're trying to prove the abuse, especially if it wasn't a physical abuse, if it was physical abuse, there were restraining orders, medical records, police reports, we can include those. But one thing you need to remember, and this is something people ask me all the time, You do not have to have a restraining order or a police report in order to prove the abuse. Okay, so that is really important to know. And when we talk about abuse in this sense, we are not just talking about physical abuse. That is what people, most people will consider abuse when they're talking about this. But we are not just talking about physical abuse. There's emotional, there's economic, there's so much more to it that when I meet with my clients, we really do a deep dive on all the different types of abuse. If they fit into any, sometimes someone might think, oh, he didn't hit me, but there's 20 million other things that took place that it's so grossly just horrible that they have been through. But they themselves do not consider that abuse, right? Because they have been conditioned to think that is normal. So that's why I said, you as the individual, most of the time are not qualified to say what is and is not abuse. So it's usually best to meet with an immigration lawyer before you make that decision. There is a lot that goes into it. So just make sure you are not disqualifying yourself. You are not assuming that you don't qualify. Okay. So another question that I get all the time on this topic is, do I have to stay married to this person? Do I have to live in the same house as them while I'm going through this process? The answer is no, right? USCIS wants to know that you lived with them at some point during your marriage, but that you don't have to continue living with them if it is not safe for you to do so, right? USCIS is not requiring you to stay in an unsafe condition just to apply for this visa. So that is something very important to keep in mind. You don't have to stay married to the person, but you do have to file within 2 years. So if you're going to file for divorce, within 2 years of that divorce, you have to have filed this application. If you're separated from the person, there's not really a time limit, but just know you will get support as you're going through the process if you're working with me. Let's see. And if you are just joining us and you have questions, please feel free to put it in the comments and I will gladly respond to them. So another thing that people ask is, what if I don't have any, so like I said before, if you don't have any proof of the person's status, we have ways of, one, if they were born in the US, it's easier than, let's say the person is a permanent resident and you don't have a copy of their permanent residency. Like I said, USCIS makes it easier because you can request for them to basically look through their records, because they have a file on every single immigrant. So they need to look through their records and find the person and basically say, yes, this person is a permanent resident because we did give them permanent residency, right? The next thing that you need to be able to show, so after you've proven your identity, you've proven your spouse's immigration status, you've proven that you and your spouse are in a bona fide marital relationship, right? You've proven that there was abuse in your relationship. Finally, you need to prove that you have good moral character. Okay? So if you are able to prove that you have good moral character and you're able to prove everything else, then you have a strong application. So good moral character really comes down to, in most senses, do you have a criminal history, right? If you have a criminal history, depending on what it is and how long ago or how, did they have something to do with the abuse? Because there are situations, and in some states, when the police is called on a domestic violence issue, they arrest both parties. So if that's the situation and you're not the aggressor, right, in that situation, you would still be able to prove good moral character because that is directly tied to the abuse. But if, let's say, you have any other criminal history within, years of applying, that could be looked at as an issue. But if you do not have a criminal history, what we usually do here is we do a basic background check that tells us if you have any criminal cases pending, if you had criminal cases, so that we are basically bringing this information to USCIS. Like, hey, look at this person. They've been in the US for, let's say, 5 years, and they have not had one incident with the police. Okay, that is something that we can always use to prove your good moral character. Letters from family, letters from community members. So if you are involved in a charity, if you are involved in church, all those things are ways that you can show your good moral character. Paying your taxes. This is something people don't want to talk about, but paying your taxes if you're working in the US is a great way to show that you have good moral character. So even if you can go back and watch my video on how to file taxes, even if you do not have a social security number, the IRS has a provision that allows you to get a tax ID so that you can file a tax return and pay your taxes, even though you are not, even though you do not have status or social security number. Okay, so that's very important as well. So if you're working, you should be filing taxes to be able to show good moral character. Okay, so that is the basic requirements for filing for VAWA based on abuse by your US citizen or permanent resident spouse. If you feel that you fall into this category, or if you know someone that could, please do share this video. I really want to make sure that we are building a community, and our chat is really as inclusive and as widespread as we can possibly get, because this is something that people stay in abusive relationships or not knowing, right? Not knowing that there are ways to get out of the relationship and still be able to get status. So this is definitely something that I'm very passionate about, if you can't tell already. But thank you so much for joining me on today's chat. If you have any questions or would like a personalized consultation, please feel free to reach out. My information will be in the description and on the screen, and I look forward to serving you. If you are watching this in a place where you can like, subscribe, share, please feel free to do so. The more people that we can share this with, the better. So thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to chatting with you next week, Friday, at the same time, the same place. Bye for now.